All right, welcome everybody. I'm going to get started here. That's a bit of some Baby Please Don't Go with the alternating thumb or Travis picking style. And so today I'm going to spend some time just talking down the basic tune, talk about some of the things you can do to work on getting better coordination of your fingers over the alternating thumb just to play the tune. Talk a bit about how to use that to start thinking about improvising, and even a bit about how to arrange an instrumental so that you can build it out into something that lasts the length of a whole song, even if you're not going to sing the words. I just realized that my microphone stand is right in the way of the chat window. Super uncool. So I'm going to try to move that around. And as usual, everybody light some incense or whatever it is you need to do to pray to the streaming gods. You never know. It was super flawless last time. And then like 2 hours later, I did a YouTube thing, a Facebook thing. And it went pretty great, but at one point there was a bit of a freeze as everything decided to just melt down and drop out. And then it was back. So stay tuned. All right. I saw some questions already coming in. And so the usual thing I do here is I spend 30 to 40 minutes just teaching the stuff that I've got kind of prepared so that it's relatively organized. And then I'll take some questions. I'll take questions about the material I've been working on. And also I'm here to talk somewhat about my monthly membership, the Fingerstyle 5. There should be a link underneath the YouTube video with more information about that. And registration closes tonight. So you can check that out. You can ask me questions about it. I've already seen a couple in here. You can also just hang loose and absorb the lesson and have nothing to do with the membership. That's what YouTube is about. There's also a link to some tab. You can download a basic arrangement of what I just played, not the whole improvisation, but the basic, here's what the thumb's doing, here's what the melody's doing, here's how I'm playing the melody to Baby Please Don't Go over the alternating thumb. And I left up the tabs from Friday. If you didn't catch my lesson on the steady bass version of Sitting on Top of the World, you can still go back and watch that. And you can also pull down the tab for that lesson as well. I'm not sure that tab's going to stay up after today. So if you want it, make sure you grab it now. And I probably shouldn't be drinking coffee because I'm already talking really fast because this is fun to do. here are some questions. Okay, I think I better get to some questions when we get further in. Otherwise, I will spend a lot of time just chatting. So let me get started here. I see a lot of familiar faces, some folks from the membership. Great to see you, and some other people I just know from the YouTubes, or some new folks. So that's great. All right, so let me get rolling here. The alternating thumb style is one of really the two basic ways of playing fingerstyle blues, right? So there's the steady bass, where you're just playing quarter notes on the downbeat, counting 1, 2, 3, 4. Sometimes that gets divided up into more of a shuffle feel, but that's a little on the exotic side. In the lesson that I taught on Friday, it was all just quarter note steady bass. In the alternative is doing an alternating thumb. And this is, if you learned to play any kind of pattern picking, which is usually more of an accompaniment style, like if you're singing, you play a pattern behind your vocals, then you'll have some familiarity with this. And the thing about using it for blues or for doing an instrumental version of a blues is that if you've been playing patterns and if you've been doing it for a while, breaking open the pattern so that your thumb can be independent of your fingers is the biggest challenge to doing this, because you've got this muscle memory that tells your fingers to do stuff with your thumb. And what you need to do in order to play a tune like this is to be able to separate out the thumb and play it without the fingers getting involved, so that you can then take a melody and then place it over the thumb. So there's this physical challenge of getting the thumb and the fingers broken apart so that this is doing this, and then these guys on top can do that. And then there's the musical challenge of understanding, well, your thumb is basically providing the groove and the chords. It's kind of the whole rhythm section. And then the fingers are going on top of that. And there's the challenge of getting it all kind of hooked up rhythmically while not losing sight of what's going on musically. So the first thing that I suggest you do is go through and either looking at the tab or thinking about what your thumb is doing in the chords, and get familiar with the chord progression, and then look at what the thumb is doing to spell out that chord progression. Because the biggest hang up to being able to play this stuff, in my opinion, is learning it as a fixed rote bunch of moves and not really understanding the underpinnings of it musically. So in this tune, now I'll get off my soapbox and just explain stuff. But in this tune, we've got 2 bars of E. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then 2 bars of A. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the first 4 bars of the tune. And then a bar of E, bar of B7, and then 2 more bars of E. Kind of a stop at the beginning of bar 8. So that's the whole thing. It's just 1, 4, 1, 5, 1. Now every chord kind of has its own rules about what you're supposed to play in the bass. Like if you're grabbing an E chord, there's kind of a idiomatic sense that, well, these are the bass notes that go underneath that chord, right? So if you're on E, you kind of have 2 choices if it's alternating thumb. You're either going to be going between the 6th string and the 4th string. That's the simplest solution and often the best one, especially if you're improvising, because the alternative is to play 6th string, 4th string, 5th string, 4th string. Now in terms of technique, I've got a little palm muting going on here. I'm got this part of my hand resting right where the bridge joins the strings to make it a little thumpy. And I'm using my index finger to hold down both the 5th string and the 4th string. That's kind of it. That can be a little tricky. So if it's better to do something like this, then go for it. But the thing that's going on, the right hand is trying to create as much separation in terms of tone between the bass and the melody. Like the reason that you mute the low strings is so they have kind of a drier, thumpier sound. And so when the melody notes ring out, you hear a real distinction. If you played this, there's less foreground and background, right? The melody doesn't stick out as much because the bass is kind of taking up too much space. It's taking up, it's sustaining. The notes are big and fat and round, and they're kind of overwhelming the melody, which is trying to survive up here on this one skinny little high string. So if you can make the bass a little thumpier and a little drier, the notes don't last as long. There's more room to really pull out and articulate the melody. With the left hand, you're trying to leave as much, you're trying to leave as many fingers free on top to do melody and chord things. So when you're playing fingerstyle, you don't have, if you're playing an E chord, and if you're thinking of this as like an E major or an E7, you don't have to hold down all that stuff because you're not strumming the chord. You're not responsible for every string. You're only playing this until you put the melody in. So this is all you need to finger. You don't need to use up your other fingers doing stuff because you want to have them free for melodies and things like that. So those are just some opening considerations. And so the advantage of this kind of bass, 6th string, 4th string, 5th string, 4th string, is that you're playing the root, the 5th, and the root. So you're filling out more of the chord. And if you're just playing a single note melody on top, the more harmony you can provide on the bottom, the better. So it's a richer sound because you've got all these notes happening. If you just do the root and the root, it works and it's super cool. There's just not as much variety. So my vote is when you're laying out the melody, if you can get the more complex bass happening, great, because when you just play 6/4 and then you repeat it, then within one measure you've already got some repetition. Whereas if you can play 6/4, 5/4, then within one measure you've got one idea and you're not repeating it until the next measure. That's a little bit of that's a little algebraic for what we're here to do right now, but it's just something to think about. So on the E, you're going to be playing 6/4, 5/4. On the A, things get turned a little inside out. You're going to have the root, the 5th, the 6th, and the 5th. And again, you could just do 5/4, 5/4, right? But you're going to do, if you want sort of a broader sound, and again, it gives it more foundation. It's also more like what a bass player would do, right? Because what you're doing, really, you're kind of filling in the gaps rhythmically between this and this. And then, right, and you're really trying to supply the bottom end and think like what a bass or a tuba or some other low-end instrument would do. So, that for the E, and then when you're back to the E, you're going to have that. And then on the 5 chord, on the B7, things get a little hairy because now you have to start moving a finger around. You got the 5th string and the 4th string and the 6th string and the 4th string. So here's 5, 4, 6, 4, 5th string, 4th string, 6th string, 4th string. All right, so like that. So point is, that's a little in the weeds, but you want to be able to go through the tune and just go, what's my chord progression? Oh, it's 2 bars of E, 2 bars of A, back to E, B7, E. And that's really the first step rather than looking at the first measure and how it's all put together, the first step is to go, what's the chord progression? What's my thumb going to be doing? Can I play through the chord progression having the thumb do what it's supposed to be doing? Now, if that's kind of making your circuits fry, then just leave out, the extra string and just play 6/4, 5/4, 6/4, 5/4, 6/4. And that's totally cool. And in fact, a lot of times I'll drop back to just the 6th string and the 4th string, 5th string and the 4th string when I'm improvising, because it's too much to think about when you're trying to do stuff on the high strings. You just don't want to be thinking about that much complexity in the thumb, right? So the next thing to do is look at the melody. And so before you start trying to put the melody over the bass, just read through the melody as tab. Sorry, kind of a mustache hair going rogue on me. That's disgusting. The melody starts off like that, and don't try putting it over the thumb. Just try looking at the, if you're looking at the tab or looking at the notation or sort of just looking at the video and trying to learn it by ear, just try to play the melody. There's the opening phrase, and then the second phrase is almost exactly the same. It just lands down on the 2nd fret of the 3rd string. And then repeat the opening phrase, and then a very similar phrase, rhythmically almost identical, and then the closing phrase. Right? So you want to start to think about it as a musical idea and a melody, that you're playing, as opposed to like something you've got to like put together with your fingers. The fingers are supposed to help you express the melody and not the other way around, whatever that would be. So when you can go through and play the melody, don't use your thumb to play any of the melody notes because it's going to be busy. Maybe even park it on the low strings. And it's not a bad idea to notice any rhythmic similarities between the different phrases, because the next thing you have to do is put those rhythms together over the thumb, which is tricky. So if you can count it out while you're playing the melody, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, and 3, 4, and 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, and 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, and 3, 4, 1, 2, and 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1. And that's important because now what you got to do, you've learned the bass and what the chord progression is, you've learned the melody. Now you want to synchronize those two things. And the thumb is the thumb is the pulse, right? The thumb is just playing 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And so everything is going to be based off of the thumb. The thumb is counting for you, basically. It's counting for the listener. It's playing the groove. So now you've got to be thinking about 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, and 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's where it gets interesting. 1, 2, and 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, and 3, 4, 1, 2, and 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1. Right? Now that may not be enough of a breakdown, so you might want to go and start looking at how to break that down further into a series of rhythmic moves that you can work out. But I'm going to pause there because there are some questions and also some heckles. So yes, I will have more coffee, and I will do this even faster. Let's see what we got here. And feel free to post questions about that. The next thing I'm going to do is talk about a more broken down way to practice rhythms between the fingers and the thumb. But first, I'm going to look and see some of these questions. So let's see. Okay, so first question. Hi, just wondering if the tab is right. Hopefully. The tab, I may not have played it at the opening exactly like the tab because there's a lot of rhythmic latitude in a tune like this. And I'm not actually looking at the tab when I ultimately go and play a song. So it's an accurate version. It's my arrangement of the tune. So the idea of going to the 4 chord on the 3rd bar, I got, I believe, from Big Bill Broonzy's version. So if you want to get sort of the flavor of what I'm trying to do, it's not a transcription of Big Bill Broonzy. That's not kind of what I do. But I do my homework. So when I do an actual like lesson with like when I do like on the usual YouTube lessons that are pre-recorded, I'll make sure that it's like completely dialed into the tab. If I'm doing something live, I want to look at the tab while I'm doing it. So it's reasonably accurate, but it may not be perfect. Okay. Last time you read my question about which course I should get next of yours. I now have your True Fire Handbook 1 and 2 plus 30 licks. Thank you. And I forgot to answer which ones to do. Okay, that's kind of a question I'll do at the end about well, no, I said that last time. Okay, a question about, so people were asking about the True Fire courses and how they, what order do they go in. And here's the basic rundown. For absolutely beginning fingerstyle blues, there's the Fingerstyle Handbook 1 and 2. One of them, did we conk out? Oh, wonderful. Let's see. Hang on. Let's see. Are we still streaming? I hope so. I'm gonna pretend we are. Okay, so the error. Phooey. All right, stand by. Okay, I think there's a bit of a glitch in there, but I think we're back. Okay, so the True Fire stuff, the basic stuff for just learning alternating thumb and steady bass are the Fingerstyle Handbook 1 and 2. After that, if you just want to learn some tunes, some etudes, you could do the Fingerstyle Essentials or the Fingerstyle Blues Take 5, or the Fingerstyle Blues Factory. The Factory is starting to get into a little bit more of like you learn a bunch of licks and then you put it all together into some tunes. And then, so that's kind of the intermediary stuff. And then the advanced stuff is the new school Fingerstyle Blues, which is pretty hairy. That's whole arrangements, whole complete tunes. There's voicings all over the neck. There's a lot of different stuff going on in there. So that's the order of the True Fire stuff. Is the True Fire stuff the best way to learn from me? It just depends. That stuff is all there. It exists, and you can. I certainly feel like it's good stuff, and I love when people check it out. I don't do a channel on True Fire like a number of the True Fire teachers do. So my Fingerstyle 5 membership is the channel that I do. So if you want more of an ongoing thing, which more about that later, then stay tuned, and I'll talk about that a bit at the end. Okay, a couple more questions. Okay, this is a good one from Donald. For some reason, I keep better time or rhythm when I play alternating bass instead of monotonic bass. Is this common? Yeah, but I hear this from both sides. Basically, people who have grown up playing alternating thumb or pattern picking have a really hard time with the steady bass because it feels weird to just stay on one string. people who started off playing steady bass blues like Robert Johnson and things like that sometimes have a really hard time getting the alternating thumb together. So I don't think either one is inherently more difficult than the other. I think it's just whatever your hands got used to first. I think you can get good at both of them, and I think that it takes the same kind of exercise and the same kind of attention to the details to work on either one of them. And in either case, you're trying to break apart the fingers from the thumb, get the thumb independent, think of the thumb as the rhythm section, and then do exercises to start putting rhythms over the top. But once you start thinking that way, it doesn't matter which one you started with, because the thought process is the same. You're going to think the same, you're going to work out the syncopations over the thumb the same way, whether you're working out steady bass or alternating bass style. So, you know, they're kind of the two wings of the genre, you know, so it's good to know them both. It's just one of them is going to be trickier than the other, just depending on which point of view you're coming from. Okay. A couple more questions and then we'll get into the next step. What level of, okay, this is from Jim in Vermont. What level of competency do you recommend to get the most out of the fingerstyle 5 lessons? Someone just wrote me this actually like an hour or two ago, and I was writing him back about it. I recommend that people have some finger picking experience, even if it's just playing finger picking patterns, and that you're comfortable switching chords. It doesn't include anything from the absolute ground up. Like, the idea of the membership is to teach you a new tune every month and how to develop it. So it doesn't necessarily replace other things you're working on. It's just a way to have a specific thing to work on every month. And also, like, if you're really tired of trying to figure out what to practice and in what order to practice it in, the material rolls out on a weekly basis. So the first week you get the tune to work on, and you get both a basic and an advanced version to work on. So whatever level you're at, you can work on that. Some people, all they work on all month is just learning the basic version. Some people are already playing the basic version by the end of the first week, and they're already like into the advanced version, and that's cool too. The second week, I post a bunch of exercises, and that's kind of what I'm going to show you a version of next. It's like, well, if I have this tune and I'm trying to learn it, how do I break it down? And this comes from all the time I spent teaching people live, where when I started teaching, I'd hand someone an arrangement. I'd be like, okay, great, learn this. And they'd come back and be like, oh, what do you mean? Like, that was hard. And I'm like, oh, well, let me see what you did. And they'd get a couple bars in, and I'd be like, oh, I forgot to tell you, this thing is tricky. Let's work on that chord change. And they'd do another bar and say, oh, I forgot to tell you, this part's tricky. Like, you need to be able to do this with your right hand. And, as we went through it, I realized, like, oh, I forgot to tell them all these things to look at. So the exercises kind of zero in on the details. Like, oh, well, if you're doing this, that's great, but what do you do about switching from the A to the E chord, or the E chord to the A chord? Or what do you do about practicing that ring finger thing with the B7? Like, the exercises are a chance to go back and like dial in all the little bits that might be hard for the tune. And so those 2 weeks kind of go together. And then the third week is when I post some improvisation exercises, because one of the things that, there are two things really that before I did the membership and all the TrueFire stuff was out, I'd get these emails, and usually one of two things. One would be, I'm trying to learn your stuff, but I'm having trouble with coordinating my thumb with my fingers. So that's one thing to talk about. And then the other really common thing was, I learned all these tunes, but I'm just playing them by rote, and I'd like to be able to improvise, or I'd like to be able to make up some stuff of my own. How do I make up my own arrangements, and how do I improvise and all that? So those are kind of the two big things that we focus on, and they're kind of on a continuum. Like, once you learn how to get your right hand coordinated and how to learn a tune quicker, then you're able to start moving into the arranging and improvising stuff. And even the people that are already working on improvising and arranging stuff really like going back and working on the exercises, because they find that it helps them to kind of clean up things that maybe they weren't working on before, but they kind of just sort of motored through without stopping to pay attention to. So that's kind of the structure. So first week a tune, second week some exercises, third week improvisation, fourth week we do a live stream like this. where I talk about the big picture of how to arrange the tune and where to fit the improvisation in, and maybe a little bit about how to do some chord substitutions, how to make it kind of interesting, and then also do a bunch of question and answers about the whole month. And then it starts all over again. So there's no real, you can't really fall behind because every month there's a new song, and you can always start from the beginning of the new song and just work at whatever level you're at. Okay. Let's see. A couple more, and then I will get back to business here. Several questions. I'm not sure if these are questions or not. Okay, a couple things about palm muting. Palm muting feels cramped on the treble strings, and my attack on these strings is an angle. I'm used to more of a vertical pluck. How do I adjust to this? And let's go with that for now, because I know there were a couple of questions. Because further back, someone's had a question about, if I'm not a big fan of muting the bass string, should I stick to ragtime? No, look, you don't have to do the palm muting. That's just a creative choice. And if your hand feels weird like this instead of like this, that's okay too. There are tons of people who don't play that way. And there's also, like Mississippi John Hurt doesn't palm mute. Gary Davis doesn't sound like he palm mutes. Not everybody does it. It's a sound that I like to create that differentiation, and I like it specifically for the kind of improvising that I do because of that differentiation between the bass and the melody. But it's not a requirement, and you can certainly work on all of these other things, the syncopation and the improvisation and the arranging, even if that's not the way you want to hold your hand. The only advice I would give is, if you're trying to adjust, is to put your hand down, put your thumb on the fourth string, put your index on the third string, middle on the second string, ring finger on the high string, and then just slowly slide the fingers back towards the bridge until you've got a little bit of space, so that your index finger bumps into your thumb right around the first joint of your thumb, right where the thumb bends. That's about the distance that you want. If you're playing like this, it's going to be hard. It's certainly going to be hard to palm mute. It's going to be really hard to get any power out of your fingers because they're going to keep bumping into each other. So this kind of thing alone goes a long way towards getting kind of the strength and just getting everybody kind of set up in a way that's sort of ergonomic, or lets the fingers go where they need to go. Okay, so let me pause on the questions here. I know there's a bunch of them, but I'll try to get to more of them in a little bit. I want to keep moving here. And just talk a little bit about, because I got my notes here. I've got notes so I don't forget things. Just a little, I don't want to get too in the weeds about this, but just a couple of suggestions for how to work on the rhythmic aspect of things. And specifically just how to work on getting the notes you need over the bass. So let's just look at that opening phrase, or really look at the phrase as it's going from E to A. So coming from here. So the name of the game is just putting these different rhythms over the bass. And so the first thing you can do is just practice it as just as a general thing to be able to do. So just really everything you play in the melody, once you have the bass established, every note you play in the melody is just going to be either a pinch, which means something that's played with the thumb, where the thumb and the fingers are playing at the same time, or it's going to be something that happens in between. So just what I mean by that is, if you're playing and you want to start putting notes just on the downbeat, then you're going to be playing the thumb and the ring finger. The thumb's playing the first bass note of the pattern, and then the index finger's playing the melody at the same time as you play that first bass note. So, and that's just playing on the downbeat on 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now you can start to move that note around and try putting it on, say, the second beat. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And you can put it on the third beat. 1, 2, 3, 4. And you can put it on the last beat. then you can start putting more than one pinch into the equation. So say you play on the second, third, and fourth beats. And finally, that's all pinches, right? That's all played on the downbeat. And finally, you can start to play notes where you're playing in between. So if you had a note like this, then you would play the pinch, and then you would respond by playing another note on the and. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and you could put that wherever you wanted. You could put it on the second beat. 1, 2 and 3, 4, 1, 2 and 3. Put it on the second and fourth beats. 1, 2 and 3, 4 and 1, 2 and 3, 4 and so when you look at the rhythm of a melody, you can see that it's made up of these little moments. So 1, 2 and 3, 4 and. That's just with some notes added with the finger, right? So 1, 2 and 3. 1, 2 and 3, 4 and. So if you put the melody note in, you have 1, 2 and 3, 4 and. And so that melody and that moment is just made up of that kind of coordination. And so breaking it down to just what's happening rhythmically and just putting that rhythm on the high string. 1, 2 and 3, 4 and then putting it over the bass. And then adding in the fingers is just a process that you can use over and over again to start to put a melody over an alternating thumb. So that idea, just that you can break it down and not necessarily have to learn it by rote, but learn it as a thing that's a musical idea that you can remember, I think is kind of important. And so you can work through the tune that way and see all those moments. And then this is the exact same rhythm. And so is this. And then this is very similar. Awesome. And then this is different. But they're all just built up out of these pinches and notes in between the pinch. So that idea that you can just break down what's going on musically into these little blocks that you can understand and put back together makes it easier to remember stuff. So that can start to kind of make the alternating thumb feel a little less alien if you can, break it up into these little pieces. Okay, let me look at a couple more questions here, because there are now a bunch of them. And it looks like the streaming is still working, so yay for that. Okay. Let's see. Okay, do I have any general advice for new Fingerstyle 5 members about how to get started, i.e. should I go through the core concepts videos first or start working on Ramsey Avenue Swell, which is the current tune? Excellent question. And again, this comes up a fair amount. I would say go through, just watch the core content, just so you know what we're all talking about. Just basically ideas about, groove and right hand coordination, ideas about how to find chords up the neck, ideas about how to pick tunes for your repertoire, ideas about arranging and improvising. Those are really the 5 things. But you can just kind of go through them, and then just as like a thing to watch. And then I would start with the current tune. There's an archive of tunes at this point. There's maybe 6 or 9 other tunes you could work on any month if you felt like it, and all the exercises and all the live streams that went with them. But I always recommend people start with the current tune, because that seems like that way everybody's posting their versions of that tune. Everybody's talking about the challenges and things they're running into playing that song. And it's fun to see other people working on the same thing and seeing them post and what they're doing with the song, especially when it gets into the arranging and improvising, because everybody's got a slightly different take on the song. A couple more here. From George, I have been through 3 online sites. Each helped, but Fingerstyle 5 is the most valuable experience of my guitar journey. This is more of a comment. David doesn't teach what to play, he teaches how to play. Oh, thank you, George. Well, that's very nice. I didn't know that was thought that was just going to be a question, but that turned into a comment. Awesome. Thanks. Appreciate that. Okay, from Mark, where is the fingerstyle for absolute beginners again, please? Oh, yes. That would be the TrueFire Fingerstyle Blues Handbooks 1 and 2. Although I'm working on some beginning lessons for Travis picking and steady bass that will be posted on my site as well. Those are coming in the fall, I think. Maybe if I say I'm doing it, it'll really happen. Okay. Someone already answered. Okay, which lesson stream is this part of? Not sure how to sign up. This is just a live stream I'm doing today on YouTube for anybody who's on YouTube. It's open to the public, but I'm talking a bit about my membership, and there's a link with a page that has. So underneath this lesson, right down there, there's a link to a page that has a bunch of sample lessons from the actual membership that you can watch. So there's some exercises and improvisation exercises, and if there's arrangements of a few different tunes you can check out. There's some student work. There's a gallery of posts from people, things that they posted that they learned and worked on. And then there's a more detailed description of how the membership works sort of week to week. So if you want to just go check that out, you can get more information and you can post your questions here. I'm going to talk a little bit more about Baby Please Don't Go for maybe 10 or 15 more minutes, just talking about improvising and arranging, some slightly more advanced topics. And then I'll take some more questions. And if there's more questions about the membership and how it works and what it's for and all that, I'll be glad to spend a little more time on that. But I want to make sure I actually do some real teaching. So let's do that. Okay, let's pivot now. That's some real lowdown on how to start putting this stuff together note by note. But now let's talk a little bit about improvisation, and especially in the context of alternating thumb. In terms of improvising, improvising and arranging really go hand in hand because let's look at it this way. The first thing you can do is learn the song, right? And if you're singing the song, then you only have to learn 1 or 2 ways through the song, right? Because you're going to sing the verse after verse, and the different verses are going to create the interest, right? That the verses tell a story. If you don't sing, or don't believe you can sing, or don't want to sing, or just like to play instrumental music, then you have a different challenge, which is how are you going to make this instrumental version of a song feel interesting? And a lot of blues songs are only 8 or 12 bars long, and you don't have verses, right, when you're playing instrumentally. So the first thing you got to do is learn an arrangement of the song, right? Learn the melody. We've already been over a basic arrangement of the song. The next thing you can do is you can take the same melody, same arrangement, and make it more interesting. You can do some walking bass lines. You can do some chord substitutions. You can put in some fills, some licks if there's room in the melody. This melody's pretty busy, but there might be some places to do that. And then you can start to build out the arrangement with some other kinds of details. The simplest thing to do is, after you play the melody, play a solo, like improvise over the whole form, like you were taking a guitar solo. Like if you've got any kind of background playing electric guitar or electric blues, you could basically treat it like, well, I'm going to play the melody once or twice, then I'm going to solo. I'm going to play 2 or 3 choruses, and then I'm going to come back and play the melody. So here's a super condensed version of that, just playing the melody once, playing a solo for 8 bars, and coming back and playing the melody, right? So you could just have... right? So now we've got a little arrangement. It's short, it's still less than a minute, but it's got some contrast. It's got the melody, it's got the solo, and then it's got a melody, the melody again at the end. And it's got a little ending, like I did a little tag, like a little, just repeated, did a little lick at the end. So that's the simplest thing you can do. And that solo could be longer. And if you do play electric guitar and you remember what it was like playing with your friends when you were all learning to play, you know that the solos could be incredibly long, right? And sometimes that's super fun. But sometimes you want to create more something else going on in the middle. You could do the melody once, do a chorus of solo, do a more interesting or more embellished version of the melody, take another solo, and then come back and play the simple melody. And so a couple of things you can do with the melody, like you want to look for where the space is in the melody, right? So we got a whole bar here where we're really just playing the bass. And then another whole bar here where we're just kind of playing the bass. This is busier. But then we have another measure at the end where nothing's really happening except the bass. So you could do a little bass line. You could start to walk your way up or do something different with the bass in between the melody. Right? Instead of just going right to the fourth string, you could do a hammer on. You could even try to coordinate a walking bass line with the melody. And thinking first, well, I want to have that walking up. And then on the A chord, I want to have that walking up. Right? So So that means thinking, well, where is this happening? And coordinating that. And if I'm up here, what do I have to do to get the melody? I got to jump back over here. So you've got something a little more involved at that point. And that might be one thing you could do. You could also think about if there's other chords that could fit underneath that melody. This is just an E chord, so what can we put underneath it? Well, maybe we could play like an E7 sus chord. And maybe we could, there's nothing really happening right now, maybe we could play an A minor chord. The melody still fits over that. This note here, we could go back to E or we could go to C7 and put the blues lick melody over that. And then instead of playing B7 directly, we can go to F sharp minor and then to B7. And then maybe go to an A chord before getting back to the E. As long as the melody is still good and the chord progression is taking up the same amount of space, you can get away with that. So, so maybe that's the way you play the melody the second time after you've taken your first solo. I just realized doing this, there's one other thing you could do here, which is if you're going to play an E suspended chord and then go to an E and put this note on top, you might want to play this chord to get you over to the A. I don't think that's a big Bill Brunsey chord, but I'm not going to worry about that. Here's an E with a flat 13 and a sharp 9 going over to the A. So So now we've got something where we could do first melody. now we've got 5 choruses, and we're really just playing the melody and a little bit of improvising. And so you can start to sort of just like build it out like that. And so then the last thing we can do is do some sort of real arranging by doing a couple of things. Some more. We haven't really talked about chordal things you could do, but if you can find some, if you start to be able to find chords up the neck. For E minor, and then for A7. Then you can start to do things, something that a lot of swing and big band ensembles did, the shout chorus, which is basically, in a big band, you'd have this moment towards the end of a tune where everybody was playing together. And it was usually chord-based. It was usually really like this rhythmic riff. And they called it a shout chorus. And you can approximate that because if you're just playing single notes and a bass, and you suddenly start playing a bunch of chords, like... really effective as a contrast. And you could even do just 4 bars and just kind of set up the second 4 bars as a kind of a solo thing. So if you have not just sort of soloing over great wide open spaces. Now you're soloing in the context of a chordal thing, that's got some kind of idea to it. And what's nice is you can have some parts of what you're doing that are worked out. Like you can work out these chord voicings and this little chord riff. And then you can have places where you're just going to improvise in between. And so you don't have to worry about what am I going to come up with for this whole 8 bars or this whole 16 bars. You just have to fill those 4 bars every time they come around. You could do the shout chorus 3 times in a row and just do slight variations on it. So each time it's a little bit different, and that can fill out a whole lot of the arrangement with a lot of interesting stuff, and you're still just playing an 8-bar blues. So there are a lot of different ways you can sort of slice and dice this stuff and put it together and take it apart and put it back together again. So let me play through a full. Let me take a whole pass through the song using some of those ideas. So starting with the melody, doing a bit of soloing over the whole 8 bars, coming back with an embellished version of the melody, doing another solo that incorporates some shout chorus stuff, and then coming back out at the end to do the whole song. So it has this whole kind of like bell-shaped curve to it. And while I'm doing that, if you've got questions about any of the things I've been talking about arranging or about improvising or the alternating thumb, or if you have questions about the membership itself, I'll talk about that when I get back from doing this improvisation. Hey, Hermano, everything's been pretty good. I think there was one freeze, but other than that, things are working out. Hermano is my internet streaming sensei, so nice to see him here. All right, here we go. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so those are some ideas. Here's a question that I missed before. And let's see. From Todd, did I misunderstand, or do you switch to an E minor instead of E for the first part of the shout chorus? And if so, can you explain why? This is an excellent question, Todd. Thank you. So blues is very ambiguous on the subject of major and minor and all of that. And really, this melody is really an E minor melody. I mean, it's basically, the tune is really in a minor key. You could play more of a major sound on the one chord, but it would sound pretty weird to me. So I really am thinking of it as being E minor to A7 in the first place. So, in my mind, I'm not really switching to E minor when I get to the shout chorus because I already feel like it kind of is in E minor, and the chords should reflect whatever key you're in. But blues can be very squirrely that way, and a lot of us grow up playing minor pentatonic licks over dominant chords. You got right. It's major, right? But we're playing. So as guitar players, our ears are used to the sound of minor over a dominant chord. But really, every little thing that we're doing is about mitigating that tension by pushing the minor third towards the major third, or literally resolving the flat third to the major third. So in that case, with a dominant kind of tune, then if I was going to go to play a chord-based thing, a shout chorus thing, I'd be careful to play dominant seventh chords. But in a tune like this, which feels to me like minor, then I'm going to go for a minor sound when I go to make the shout chorus chords. I will say this, not to make things too confusing, because whenever I start to talk about modes, it's just a minefield, right? Modes are so confusing so much of the time. But because I swiped the basic idea for this arrangement from this Big Bill Brunsey version, and because some people play it like you hear Lightnin' Hopkins or Big Joe Williams play it, and I think of it as being more of a vamp. Just it's. Maybe a 5 chord, but it's basically this big 1 chord vamp. But the Big Bill version goes to a really spelled out A7 chord, and I thought, well, that's kind of cool. I want to include that in my arrangement. And so because it's a E minor to A7, it's kind of a Dorian sound. Minor 1 chord, major 4 chord, or 7th E 4 chord. So I'm not going to get into all of the why of that, but that's why the voicings I'm using rock between E minor and A7. And those two sounds sound good. Right, this is E minor, A7, and then reverse it. A7, E minor, A7. So that's kind of a very long and overly detailed answer to that. Okay, what often happens is I lose some of these questions from earlier in the thread. So if you had a question earlier that I did not answer, if you would repost it if you're still here. and I will try to get to it before I wrap up. But for anybody who is interested, I will now give just a short rundown of the logistics of the membership, so that anybody who's interested can know what they're getting into. Like I said, the simplest thing is I did post a page where there's a bunch of sample lessons and a bunch of student work and some other explanations of what's going on. But the short version is, let me explain first what it is not. Okay, as you can probably tell by now, I do not teach note for note renditions of the pre-war blues repertoire. That's just not my thing. And there are people out there who are amazing at it. So if you want to learn exactly how to play, that Robert Johnson tune or that Blind Blake tune or that Gary Davis tune, go find Tom Feldman, go find Homespun. Those are like the two best places I know. Fly to Seattle and take lessons with Steve James. That guy is killer. I mean, there's so many good people who are really good at that. So I'm not as good at that as I am at other things, so I don't even bother teaching it. So I don't do that. The other thing is if you really just want to learn a bunch of songs and you just want an archive with like hundreds of songs to work on, go to TrueFire, go to JamPlay or whatever that's called now, where TrueFire owns JamPlay, or, go to, Guitar Tricks. Like, go to one of those sites because they're going to have boatloads of that stuff. And if you just want to learn a bunch of songs, like, that's awesome. You can learn so much from learning a bunch of songs and then digesting it and figuring it out. So that's the place to go. That's not really what I'm doing here either. There is an archive of material, but it's, a half a dozen or a dozen songs. Like, there's stuff you can go back and work on, but that's not really the point. I created this membership to respond to three things. One, people who said, I have trouble getting my right hand coordinated. I don't know what to work on. Two, people who said, I want to be able to make up more of my own stuff and be able to improvise on it. And three, people who said, I have some of your stuff. I have this TrueFire thing. I have this book. I have these other books by other people. I don't know what to work on. And I don't know in what order to work on. And there's too much to work on. What do you recommend I do first? So the membership is basically every month, like, let's all take a deep breath. We're going to work on one song, and it'll be steady bass or alternating thumb, teach you how to play an arrangement of the melody so that you can work on your right hand coordination in a really focused way, but not just do exercises like let's work on a song, because songs are fun to play. And then basically just know that, like, every week there's one thing to work on. First week you work on the tune, and then if you got that down, second week, here are some exercises to break it down. Third week, if you want to start improvising, here are some exercises to start putting some scales and chord moves over the thumb. Fourth week, if you want to start building on arrangement, let's talk about that. Next month, as far as you got, great. If you want to keep working on it, cool, but we're going to do a new song. And that'll have some slightly different challenges, but it'll also have some of the same things. Like, every month you're going to be working on your right hand. Just, I try to change the keys up. I try to change the feels up. So like one month you might be working on alternating thumb and E. And if alternating thumb is great for you, then you'll be sailing, and someone else who's mostly a steady bass player will be like, oh, this alternating thumb is killing me. And then, the next month, if it's steady bass, maybe that's your thing. And maybe all the alternating thumb people are like losing their minds, right? But either way, you'll be working on the same kinds of coordination. So even though you sort of start fresh with a new song every month, it gives you a different way to work on the things that you need to work on. So that if your issue is the right hand coordination, each month you got new stuff, you got a new song to work on and new exercises. And I tend to talk about the same concepts each month, but as applied to different songs. So there's a cumulative effect even as you work song by song. And there's plenty of people who, like, they post the song for the month and they're like, oh, by the way, I'm working on this other thing. Like, there's a guy in the membership who's like this fantastic Celtic guitar player. And so he'll post these like Celtic arrangements if that's what he's also working on or whatever it is. Because the other two components are there's a live component at the end of each month, just like this. And then there's a community forum. And so people can post their work, and the range is kind of remarkable. So if you feel like, do I fit in? Am I good enough? Am I too beginning or am I too advanced? There are some killer players who can really do this stuff already. And then there are some people who are really just like they're posting like, it took me 10 takes and I finally got a version of the basic version where I didn't make too many mistakes, so I'm posting it. And everybody's like, fantastic, which is really fun to watch. And also people that post questions, like, the lessons are posted in a way that you can put comments underneath them. And so if you got a question or, like inevitably I post a lesson and someone's like, there's a problem with the tab on the third line. I'm like, oh yeah, sorry, let me fix that. So you're not just sitting there struggling with like, oh, the video is different from the tab. You can ask a question and usually like someone beats me to it. Like someone else would be like, oh yeah, Dave screwed up the tab again. Here's what's supposed to be happening. I proved the living daylights out of the tab, but still stuff gets by. And sometimes it's like, I played it wrong and the tab was right or whatever it is. So there's an environment in which you can be around other people working on this stuff, which even before everybody was quarantined, like it's not always easy to find people that are playing the kind of material you're playing, much less playing that song. So to see someone else playing the song you're working on and go like, well, how did you do that thing with your thumb? Or did you have a problem with this voicing? Or what are you doing about those stupid F chords with the thumb and the bass? Or whatever it is. That's kind of a nice feature. So that's really the idea, is like work on tunes, do exercises to improve your coordination, do exercises to start working your way into some improvisation, learn about how to arrange tunes and put them together so you can have a repertoire of instrumental tunes that you can sit down and play and feel pretty good about. And then a forum to discuss all that stuff in. That's basically the whole shebang. The membership is $20 a month, and there's no like long-term subscription. You sign up, and if you are done, you can unsubscribe and you'll just finish out the month, and then you're out of there. I just want it to be a kind of low-key, and if you're enjoying it and you're getting stuff out of it, then stick around. And if you're not, then go find something that works better for you. It doesn't work for everybody. Not everybody's interested in working on stuff the same way, and everybody teaches from a point of view. This is my point of view. These are the things that kind of help me figure out how to play. So I'm happy to kind of try to explain and share them. But I have no delusions about being all things to all people. I don't think anybody is, and so I'm happy to work with the people that want to stick around and work on it. And if someone finds something else that works better for them, I'm like, good luck. So that's the basic scheme. Like I said, there's a link underneath to more explanation about this. And also, you can, if you click on the link below and you read all the stuff, there's also buttons where you can click and sign up if that's what you want to do. Sign up will be open through tonight. So I don't leave it open all the time because I try to devote most of the time to actually like building the lessons and answering questions and showing up. And so I usually open it in the spring and the fall. Summer, it's kind of a weird time. I had gotten a bunch of people asking if they could join and other people asking about it from the YouTube things that I was doing. So I thought I would open it up for a few days to anybody who wanted to jump in the middle. You can still sign up until the end of tonight, and then you won't be able to sign up again until like late September, early October, or something like that. So that's my wrap about the membership. I see a handful of questions, including one from Hermano. Good. This is like a technique thing, not a membership thing per se. Assuming one can play electric guitar, how is possible to learn finger picking? What's the best way, and initial exercises? That is a great question. If you already play electric guitar, then what's good is that you already know the language and you already know what you want to be doing with the melody and with the, what's going on top. Actually, I think the biggest transition from playing electric guitar to playing acoustic guitar is learning to play in open position, because so much of electric guitar is about playing closed position chords up the neck, bar chords and jazz voicings, and improvising. And so actually one of the first things you could do, I never thought of this before. That's an awesome question because I never really thought of this before. But one of the first things you could do before you even worry about the thumb is just start taking your vocabulary, the things you know how to improvise and do up the neck, or songs and just start playing them in open position. If you know how to play blues in A, let's say some T-Bone Walker licks. See if you can play them down here. and start finding all the same stuff you use to play up the neck. Blues scales, pentatonic scales, maybe the Mixolydian. Pick a key, pick A or pick E, pick a familiar key, and just start finding the things you already know. Start translating them into the open position. And then you can start thinking about putting that stuff over a bass. But I would say first start understanding where stuff is down here, because you got to play down here because that's where the open strings are. That's where the bass is going to be. So that would be one good place to start. And I cannot believe I never thought of that idea before. So thanks for the question, Romano. And if I didn't quite answer it or you've got a follow-up, let me know. Okay. Any advice on how to move away from holding down the whole chord? If tab says E, I automatically go to the shape. I seem to lose context of the chord without the shape. Yeah, that's a tricky one, right? Because we are used to seeing the chord symbols. I think going through one of the exercises that I gave here today of just looking at the bass as the rhythm section and as the chords, and taking a couple of songs in E or in A, and just practicing playing the thumb through those chords. Like let's say you play Key to the Highway in A, right? And usually, I'd probably play it steady bass just because of the feel of the song. But let's say it's going to do alternating thumb. So. Just for the sake of argument, let's suppose that's what we're trying to do. So just go through the chords and apply those rules of what is the bass supposed to be? On A, it's supposed to be this. And on E, it's supposed to be this. And on D, for this kind of playing, it's just alternating thumb between the 6th string and the 4th string. And so just play along with a record of it. If you've got the Derek and the Dominoes version, or you've got someone else's version, instead of just sort of, we all play along with records, right? So instead of improvising or doing whatever you do, just play alternating thumb and play those bass notes. As if you were strumming chords. And that'll get you used to how the alternating thumb fits into the pocket, into the groove. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. And it'll get you can just sort of make yourself stick to just the bass notes. I'm grabbing part of the chord here because I do it too. But that's one way you can start to do it, is just to start practicing playing with just the thumb as your groove tool and start getting used to it like that. And use the accompanying left hand moves only holding down what you need to for the bass. Okay, another question. Okay, so from Jay, I don't see the register button. Okay, hopefully the button is not actually in the YouTube feed. If you click on the link that says registration and information, I'm going to look at it myself just to make sure I know what it looks like so that I can be clear. Maybe I can even just post a link in the chat. Okay. So how horrifying. There's me talking. Yeah, so if you click on the thing that says, oh. I didn't put the right link in, did I? I didn't put the right link in. Okay, I'm glad you asked, because now I will go grab that and put it in. Hang on. This is, yeah. There's a major kerfuffle. Hang on one second here. Can't believe that didn't make it into the stream. All right, I got it. I got you right here. Here we go. Amazing. Super smooth, David. Okay, here we go. There's the link. And I'll make sure that that is, if you follow that link, that should take you to the page. If you go to right at the very bottom of the first part of that page, you'll see a green button that says register now. My epic bad. I'll have to make sure that that is in the YouTube as well. Let me try to fix that super quick, or maybe I'll just fix it afterwards. But Now it's in this. Now it's in the chat. So there's that. And I'm going to put it, I see it here. I don't know why it's not showing up underneath. Oh, that's why, because that's the wrong video. Okay, well, as my friend Ronnie likes to say, let me know if the show gets too slick and professional. Well, I see it here. It's, all right. Well, now there's the link in the chat at least, and it does look to me like it's posted underneath the YouTube, but I could be wrong. That has happened many times before. Okay, post again if you don't find your way to it, and I'll try to get through some more of these questions. Oh, a question about my Martin. Okay. This is a 1956 0018. It looks like mahogany on top, but that's just because somebody must have played it like in a lot of bars before I got it. I bought it at Mandolin Brothers in Staten Island, the dear departed Mandolin Brothers, sometime around 1999. And the way I ended up buying a Martin was I made my first record in like 1994. It is thankfully out of print. But I brought my Yamaha, like my high school Yamaha, to the recording studio. And the engineer, Hank Bones, said, I have a pretty nice guitar if you want to use that on the session. And I was like, well, what do you got? He said, well, I have this OM28. I was like, okay, what's that? And so he pulled out this guitar, which he had rebuilt because it had been under his neighbor's bed for like 30 years, and she had just given it to him in pieces. And this is before everybody, like a few people were building OMs, but this was an OM from the 30s, and they made like 300 of them or 400 of them. And so he had to basically get back together, kind of like the door at the end of Monsters, Inc. Like he just had them basically reassemble this 0028, OM28. And I played it on the record, and it was the most amazing thing. So I started calling up people around New York and said, hey, I'm looking for an OM28. And the reaction was basically like, yes, who isn't? And then that's when I found out how desirable and expensive OMs were. So I went looking around New York for a guitar, and I went to Matt Umanoff a bunch of times, and there was a guy that I knew who was like a private guitar dealer in the Village, and he showed me a bunch of stuff. And I went out to Staten Island, and I played a bunch of guitars. And for those of you who never went, Mandolin Brothers was this magical place where it was in a house on Staten Island. You had to take the ferry to get there if you lived in Brooklyn like I did. And, or I guess I drove over the Verrazano Bridge, but however, it was an expedition to go. And they had, like, anything you'd heard of, they probably had. Like, a Lloyd Lohr Mandocello. Yeah, we might have one of those in the back. Or, the L5, like the one that the kind that Wes Montgomery played. Yeah, I think we have one of those. But it would all be out on the walls. And, they would let anybody take anything down and play it. And they didn't stress, and they didn't hover over you. They were just like, yeah, the good ones are in that room, or everything was good, So I just played all this stuff all day long. And, they asked me what I was looking for, and I kind of explained. And they asked, how much I wanted to spend, and I kind of explained. And they handed me this at one point. And I looked, and I was like, God, this thing's really a piece of, it's all messed up. Because I had a roommate in college who had a 57 that was just, that beautiful honey, like honey-colored aged spruce. It was an immaculate shape. He had bought it in the Bay Area in the 70s. So I sort of expected it. I was like, well, if I'm going to buy an old Martin, it's supposed to look like that, right? So I played this guitar, and I played it a bunch, and I really liked it. And I said, well, look, I'll come back on Monday. And they stuck a card in between the strings and held it for me over the weekend. And I came back in on Monday, and I looked at it, and I was like, what was I thinking? That's my guitar. And so that's how I got it. And it already looked like this when I got it. It was already, I put a few dings on it, but it was already completely played in. And it turned out that there had been 4 Martins in the basement in the shop for, I don't know, they said they'd been there for like a year or two. And they had been taken apart because they needed neck resets. And Flip Scipio, the repairman there, one day had just decided he was going to, put them all back together. And so the 4 of them came out on the floor around the same time. And they told me afterwards, after I bought it, they were like, "Oh yeah, that's the one." We were wondering like who's going to buy that one because they all thought it was the coolest. So that's what it is. And the main thing about it, which I didn't know at the time, is that the double O's are short scale. The distance from the bridge to the nut is only 24 and something inches, as opposed to a dreadnought or an OM that's 25 and something inches. So I like the way that feels. It's very springy. The other guitar that I play a lot is a Collings double O, which is rosewood, but it's really shiny because it's new, and I can't do videos with it because it just reflects a lot. I used it in a bunch of the TrueFire stuff because those guys really know how to light stuff, but when I'm just kind of here hacking around by myself, it's too hard to make it work. So that's my guitar. All right. That is a lot. So I'm going to wrap this unless I hear any other questions in the next couple of minutes. I'll play through the tune one more time. And if you've got any more questions, let me know. And if you're still looking for the registration information, let me know. So let me play a little more Baby Please Don't Go, and then come back and close things down. Okay. All right. Well, thanks everybody for being here. If you've got any more questions, drop me a line or leave a comment underneath the YouTube. And thanks for being here. I hope that helps you with your alternating thumb licks. I hope that explains to you enough about the membership, and I look forward to seeing some of you there as we get rolling into it this week. All right, thanks again for being here, and